Hi everyone and happy holidays here from Blending Graphics. Today's video is going to be all about that happy holiday spirit, and I've called this composition Santa's Helpers. So with that said, this is not actually going to be a full-length tutorial, but it is going to be more of a breakdown. I'm still going to show you step by step of how I created this picture. It's just going to be at a much faster rate than it would, let's say, a normal tutorial. So it is going to be a little bit on the longer side. I'm not going to waste any more time talking about it, so let's just get right to it. Alright, so we're turning on our main background image that we're going to use here. And the first thing that I want to do is just go to the camera raw filter just to make some initial modifications just to kind of get this image set up for success here. And the first thing I'm doing here is doing some noise reduction because it was just a bit heavy for my liking. I also want to desaturate all those orange tones that are in the background as well. I mainly want this to kind of just be more of the cyans and blues. And so now we're going into the color grading, and just to accomplish that exactly, we're just going to add a little bit more of blue tint and then some final tweaking here before we save this or press OK. So essentially just creating some contrast, adding the highlights and boosting the clarity a bit. And then, yeah, this will do it for us. So let's hit OK. And then we're going to get back into our main composition here, and we're going to scale this up so it does indeed fit our whole canvas. And we're just going to move this up here because at the bottom, we're going to use this image here to start creating a road. So I have this, we're going to make a copy of this and drag this over to the other side, so that way, again, it does fill the whole canvas. And then we're just going to blend these images together. And then once we've done that, we can essentially just go ahead and use the rectangle selection tool here just to get rid of that top portion. And then we'll do some final blending just of this back part here, so that way it fits nicely with the rest of our snow in our background. Alright, so next up, we just need to match the tones a bit. And we're using the color balance adjustment layer to do that. We're introducing some cyans and some blues, and it's just as simple as that to help match the snow of our background. And now that we have that set, we're going to add an extra bit of realism to this piece here. So we're going to bring in this image here, and it's just going to be an overlay to our road. So let's just go ahead and condense this down a little bit here. And then just like we did with the road, we're just going to make a copy of this, and we're going to flip this horizontally, and then just send this over to the right side. And then we just need to blend these two images together. And then once we're happy with how blended it is, we just need to merge the layers together, and then I'm going to invert that layer mask, and what we're doing now is just painting that texture back in. And like I said, this is just going to help bring in that realism and just help tell the story of the picture that we're trying to create here. Next step, we just got to brighten up the snow. It is too dark, plain and simple. So let's go ahead and brighten this up with our levels adjustment layer. That looks great. Alright, let's lower the opacity because it is a bit too heavy. And now we can just bring in our main subjects. So first thing we do is load in our biker, and honestly, it took forever to extract him from that background. I wish to not ever do that again. And I just skipped over that part, so you didn't need to see that. Alright, so next thing is loading in this sleigh, and now we're just trying to kind of, put these in a nice spot for our canvas and for our picture. Obviously, they're going to kind of just go right in the middle here. Alright, trees are coming in. And what we're going to do here is just lower the opacity and align this to where I want it with the background. And that looks good. So let's use our lasso tool, and we're just going to create a selection of these trees. And then we're going to click on the layer mask so that way we have just the trees here. Alright, so now we have to first blend in the snow. Once we blend in the snow, we're actually going to go to a foliage brush that I've created. And that's going to help us to just clean up the rest of the trees here. I just find this to be the neatest way and most precise to do it. Yes, it took a lot of time, but it was worth it. Alright, trees look great. We're adding a levels adjustment again to this, so that way we can just kind of tweak these a little bit, add a bit of contrast, but most importantly, we need to boost up the brightness on this. And that is looking really good. So let's go ahead and add in this house, which I'm just quickly cutting this out. I thought this house would be a nice bit of contrast. It's nice and red, it matches with our sleigh, and it just kind of takes away from all of the white going on in our picture. And let's just scale these guys up a bit since they are our main focus. I mainly just don't want our biker's head to be in front of the house, so I need there to be a bit of separation with that. Okay. So I went ahead and created a selection of that bottom part of the snow, and I'm just manipulating the snow a little bit because there was a bit of grass on that house that I'm just trying to hide, and this was the easiest way to do that. That looks good. Let's blend in the snow now. And as I'm doing this, you can take a look at our roof. It definitely is missing some snow, so that's what we're going to add on next here. So let's add in our next picture. We're going to create a selection of just this roof, and then we're going to create a copy of that selection. And then now it's just all about finding the right perspective of this. Make sure that it matches the same perspective of our current roof and that everything is covered. So something like this. Let's go ahead and turn up our opacity. Yeah, that looks good. And now we just need to hide that chimney up there. I like the one that we currently have with our roof, so this is just going to kind of patch things up a little bit. We can erase that. And now let's just kind of tidy up and clean up some of these edges here, so that way it looks a bit more well blended together. Alright, and then you can see that little chunk of roof that is also needing some snow, so that's what we're going to do now. We're just going to use the bottom portion of this roof. I don't need the whole thing. And we're doing the same steps, really. We're just going to create a copy of that selection. And then from this, same thing, we just need to find the right perspective of this and make sure that everything is indeed covered. And then we just need to erase some of the things that we don't need. Alright. And now we have a snowy roof. Moving on, we're adding some clouds. I don't really like the clouds that we currently have, so I just wanted to add a bit more just to kind of give it more variety here. And what we're going to do here is just kind of warp this down a little bit, kind of like the curvilinear shape. And we can just erase most of this. I only really need just the top right part. Obviously, our blues are very saturated, so that's the next thing that we're going to take care of. And we're just going to go to our cyans here with the hue and saturation. Just desaturate that. Okay, and then we can just take this a step further using the selective color adjustment. We can take the blacks out so it's a bit lighter. Same thing with the blues as well. Okay, and now we're just going to fade this in a bit more. We're just going to erase some of this blues from our cloud layer here just to help blend that in with our background. That looks really nice. And I want to add a bit of a sunlight on this top left corner, so I'm just painting white just on that area there. And then to help create that depth and that sense of depth, we're going to paint over our background as well, just to kind of give it that hazy look. And it also gives us a bit of separation from our main subject as well, which honestly is mainly what we want our audience to look at. That's our main focus. Alright, the last thing that we're going to do here is just kind of paint over the sky. This is going to help blend things a little bit more and just kind of hide a little bit some of those more saturated blues that are in there. And then let's go up to filter, let's go down to blur, add some Gaussian blur. Just 1 pixel will do the trick for us. I don't want to do anything too heavy. But I'm satisfied with this, it looks great. So what we can do now is just go ahead and give it the title. We'll group everything together so that way if we need to make any modifications later, we can do that. So since we did all those modifications to our background, I'm just going to revisit these trees. And first thing that we're doing is just adding a bit of highlights. We're going to add more light to the left side, because that is where the sun is coming from. And then we're going to do the opposite and darken the right side of the trees, invert that mask, and now we're going to paint that back in so we can darken that right side and just make this seem a bit more realistic. And then once we've done all of that, we're going to do exactly what we did to the background, and we're just going to paint over the trees in general with a nice light blue, and this is just going to help tie everything together nicely. Let's move on. We're adding our biker back in, and I'm using this puppet warp tool because what I want to accomplish here is right now he's set up straight pretty much, but I want him to be more in kind of like a racing pose, so I'm just arching his back down a bit and keeping his focus up, and we're going to just kind of bend the elbows a little bit too. Because what we're going to do next is add a jetpack to his back. I mean, why not? So let's just make sure that he doesn't look like he has any broken wrists or anything. Alright, so let's erase this bottom portion here, and this top part is going to be our main component of this jetpack. This is just a 3D asset I got from Envato Elements, and what we need to do is just kind of configure this. It took a little bit of time just to get it to the right spot that I wanted it and the right scale, but ultimately decided to warp this because that's just going to help give us the best look that we need and make sure that it fits well, and it looks like it fits well on his back. And I just want to straighten this out a bit so it's not too curvilinear. And we're going to load in the same thing, and I'm just going to use this back portion of the bike, and we're just going to add this onto our jetpack just to really just kind of give it a bit more character, really. Just kind of spice it up a little bit so it's not too boring looking. Yeah, that looks pretty good. We'll just make this a bit stretched out. And then we can just erase that top part because we don't need that. And the next thing that we need to do now is load in our engine, which is going to go inside this jetpack. I want to get rid of this, I don't know, like, I guess the cover of this engine. So I don't want this outer portion, so we're getting rid of this, and we're just sticking to the main part of the engine. And now that we pretty much have all of this taken out, we're going to go ahead and convert this to a smart object, and we need to scale this down a bit so that way it fits nicely in our jetpack. So let's just find the right angle. I think that looks pretty good. Okay, perfect. So ultimately, what I had to do with this jetpack, I needed to make an extra copy and send that copy below the engine layer so that way I can erase kind of the handlebars that were inside there, and so that way you don't see it on top of this engine. So that's what I did there. Let's go ahead and clean up the back portion of this engine so that way it's not being shown. It just looks ridiculous, so let's get rid of that. Alright, so next we're going to add in this little guy here where the fire is going to come out of. And honestly, I don't even know what the name of the the part of the rocket, what it is. It's kind of like the exhaust, I guess. But we're going to put this in place here, and I'm going to command click on our jetpack, or sorry, the exhaust here, just so we can get rid of this part of the jetpack. And we're going to make a copy of that, send the other one back a little bit. Excellent. All right, so we're going to drop in some, like a mask for this gentleman here, and just to kind of make sure that this fits nicely on his face at the right scale. And I'm going to erase this bottom part. We're also going to just erase the right side of the mask as well, because we don't need that. Just the front part. And because there was that strap in the background, I have to erase the glass part of the mask, and we're going to fill that in with red instead. I mean, it just matches with the rest of the color, so that seemed like the obvious choice. I also want to get rid of the yellow on the jacket, so we're going to try to find like a nice green. Obviously, the red and green's a Christmas combo of colors, so that's what we're going to add here. So let's fill this in, erase all of that yellow. And just get that top part there. And actually decided to go with red instead. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. But yeah, we stuck with the red, so I just switched up the hue on that. And he needs a red helmet to go with it. So that's what we did. Same techniques as the jacket. And now let's get started on the fire. Alright, so we're going to put this into a screen blend mode. We're going to scale it down, warp it. And we're going to make a copy of that because it needs to be sent to the back as well. And then we're going to add this blue fire on top of that. And that's going to be more towards the base there. Obviously, because that's the hottest part. And then on top of all of that, we're going to add a bit of sparklers. The same thing in screen blend mode. We're just going to make sure that this is aligned. And then we can always just erase the excess part that we don't need here. Looking pretty sweet. We need to add a few more elements to this. We're going to switch to a cloud brush, and we're going to make sure that black is our color. And we're just going to paint a little bit of smoke coming off of this, again, just to add a little bit of that realism. And once we've done that, we're going to use a solid color adjustment layer here. We're going to put this into a linear light on top of this, or maybe a vivid light. We'll switch to vivid light. And then we're going to paint on top of this to just kind of enhance it. It's hard to make a glow with a white background, so I try to add these solid color adjustment layers to help us out in that department. Awesome. Next thing we're doing is just adding some simple lighting adjustments to make sure everything's blended in nicely. We obviously have a shadow casted from the jetpack, shadow casted from the helmet, and from this mask. And it's generally done with a combination of exposure and levels adjustment layers and just solid color adjustment. Alright, so with this condensed brush tip here, we're going to add a bit of shadow underneath the bike to help kind of cement that with our ground. And once we're done with this, we're going to do some final adjustments with our person here. Just some extra shadows and highlights to the jetpack, to our person. And that's going to help round things out a little bit here. All right, that looks good. And we can paint a little bit of texture on there if you want. Just a nice little detail. And then what we need to do with this bike is we're going to add a spin blur to just the wheel area here. So let's just move this down to this back wheel. All right, and then we're just going to condense this a little bit here so it's just kind of confined to the wheel itself. We will have to erase that part on the shoe in a second here. But right now I'm just kind of making sure that the wheel has that sense of movement. And that's what this blur is going to give us. And it's just at 15 degrees that we've added that. And now we're just taking away from that shoe so that way that's not getting any blurred. All right, I'm pretty good with our guy, our biker here. Let's go ahead and transition over to our sleigh. We're going to drop in this gal here. Let's convert her to a smart object. And we have to scale her down. We want to make sure that she is the same size or at least proportionate enough in relationship to our guy here. And then we're going to essentially just get rid of some of these seats and the parts of the sleigh that we don't need. It is going to be covered by presents, so we're just going to get rid of these areas to help us out. All right, and then just this last little portion here should do it. All right, very good. We're going to drop in our first present, and we're going to get started on this crazy part of the picture here. This is where most of the time was spent. So just to kind of give you an idea, a lot of 3D assets from Envato Elements, and really all it is was just kind of putting them in different spots at the right angles that I want. A lot of masking. As you can see right now, we're just getting rid of this bottom portion to make it look like it's tucked inside the sleigh. But that's really what it is. Let's go ahead and just speed through this portion here so you can at least kind of get the feel for my process with this. And it's not going to be the whole thing. I'm not going to speed through the whole part, just kind of a few presents here that I've added in the front. So that's the general gist of what my process was like. Now all we have to do is just add another 100. I'm not going to show you that. Let's just skip over that to where all of that is put in place. All right, friends, here we are with the mountain of presents. We're going to add in a few more presents, just kind of excess that's fallen out. The first one that we're going to start out with is the present that our character is basically throwing out to the world in celebration of Christmas. And we just need to add that. We're going to add one here at the bottom that's kind of fallen out of the sleigh because there's a pylon of presents, and another one here that's just fallen out as well. So we'll just place that there. Another thing that I added on here is this garland. And it's just going to be flying outside of the sleigh. I just thought it just needed something else. It was, obviously the presents looked really nice, but it still needed something. So I've added this. We're using the puppet warp tool just to give it a bit of shape to, kind of give us that impression that it's in motion and flying around. So we're adding that. And then we can erase this bottom part that we don't need because it's going to be tucked in inside the sleigh. But then, of course, we have to add this adorable little puppy. Oh my gosh. I actually saw this picture looking around for other images, and I knew I had to add this in there. So we're making room for this little guy. He's popping up out of the presents. So I'm just selecting the majority of his body. We're going to scale this down and just kind of tuck him right behind this present right here. He's just jumping out. He's excited. He's ready for Christmas. And I'm sure Santa's going to give him a ton of Cheetos because he was a good boy. Or a good girl for that matter. I don't really know. Alright, our puppy looks good. We're going to go back to our girl here. We're going to do the same thing like our guy. We're going to give her a red sweater to wear. We're just using the hue and saturation to do that, putting it in colorize. And just kind of like on the edges here of the sweater, I'm going to bring back some of the white to kind of mimic the look of Santa and his suit with the white trimming. So we're going to do that with this sweater. And obviously we need to bring back the color of our face. But even on this beanie here, we're going to get rid of, not all of it, just some of the white trim we're going to leave there. So I really like that. And make sure to get every part of that. Very nice. Okay. We're going to start out with lighting on our sleigh first. So we're going to use an exposure adjustment layer to do this. And we're going to just increase the lights. We're also going to decrease it, invert those masks. And now we're just going to paint back, starting with the light here on the left side. We'll make that brighter. Cool. All right, and then we're going to do the opposite. We're going to go to the shadows this time. And now just on the bottom part here, just increase some of those shadows. We're going to obviously have to hit under the presents, in the front, in the very bottom of the sleigh. And even a little bit of a shadow being casted from our garland we need to add on there too. Just a little spot right here. Don't go crazy with it. And it is looking really nice. Okay, so lighting is good. I want to go to our hue and saturation and just lower or desaturate some of the red so it's not so pronounced. And then overall, we're just going to do a little bit of a global color change here, adding some cyans, some blues. So that way, again, it just matches the undertones of the background and the rest of our image here. So that's what we're doing. And so that looks really good. And now we just have to do all of that to those presents. We're going to skip over that. That took forever. But this is what that looks like with that outcome. But this is pretty much our main composition. This is the bulk of it. Honestly, at this point, we're just going to add a few other little things to kind of tie in this picture together. And then we'll be done. We're going to start out with this present here. Just, again, to help with the depth, we're going to increase this and put this in the bottom corner. Somewhere right about here. Looks good. And then we need to add blur because it's the closest thing to us. It's flying our way. And we're going to add a little cabin in the background or a nice little house. We're just going to cut this out. Looks good. And we're just going to put it in front of the trees here. Just again, just to give our background just a little something else. It still needs more. So that's what we're doing here. Scaling it up so it looks good. Okay. We're going to add another present in here. I kind of experimented where I wanted these. I was originally going to go to the very top, but then I thought that was kind of cutting our picture off a bit. So I've just put this further out into our background. We're going to have to do the same thing, but for this we're going to add a path blur to give us the impression that it's in movement here. Okay, so next we're going to add this lamp in this post here to the right side, just in front of our house. And then we have to paint away some of the front here just to look like it's being covered by some snow. Just like that. Yeah, I like that. Okay. So that looks really good. We can move on. The next thing we're going to do here is I want to just add some of the lighting on here. So we're just darkening up some of that right side, brightening up some of the left. Kind of what I've been doing with every single object that we keep putting into this picture. Just paying attention to our lighting. All right, let's scale these guys up a little bit just to take more part of our canvas. And what I was looking at before with our guy, I want to make sure that his head is not directly in front of the house. Okay. And since we did that, we can scale up this present here. And let's add some shadows being casted from the sleigh. And we can change the saturation and the hue of our present in the foreground here, just to make sure that is matching our sleigh and those presents. And now we can start adding some decorations to these houses. We're going to start with a little bit of garland on this house here. We'll make a copy of that, send it to the right window. And then we have to match the lighting and the color and tones with that as well. All right. And next we're going to add a wreath onto the door here. Same thing, we're just decorating the house, going over the same techniques of changing the tones and lighting. Let's add a nice little bow to this lamppost here. Same thing, let's add some lighting levels to this to make sure that it looks more like it's in this picture. And then we can even darken up that post as well. Just right behind the bow. There we go. Give it a little bit of shadow. Okay. All right, so let's move to our bike. We're going to add a little chain here. This is just a clamp that I've got. We're going to erase part of that bike so it looks like it's going inside of the clamp. Just like that, and we can lower the lighting levels. All right, and then once we've done this, we're going to add the chain. It's just, again, another 3D asset that I got from Envato Elements. I'm not being sponsored by them. I just really like them, and these 3D elements come in handy a lot. So I've had to make a duplicate of it because it wasn't long enough. And with those merged together, we're using the Puppet Warp tool just to kind of give it a little bit of variation and just some movement and life. And here we are after adding a little bit of color correction and lighting. What we need to do now is just add a little bit more sparks or flare on top of this chain so it looks like it's kind of inside the fire that's coming out. So we're just added another sparks image here and screen, just put it over there. And what I'm doing now is just adding some final atmosphere effects, just using my different cloud brushes to add a little bit of haze, a little bit of clouds, some frost coming off of different parts of this sleigh here. And you're going to see here in a second, I'm going to add some at the very bottom, which is going to paint like a little bit of a trail coming off because the sleigh's being pulled here. Great. So we're going to merge all these layers to a new one at the top, put it into a smart object, and then we're going to do our final corrections here in the camera raw filter. So with this, I mainly just add a little bit of exposure, add the highlights and shadows to create the contrast, add some clarity, sharpening. These are all the general adjustments that I make in the camera raw filter, and then I usually kind of end things out with a little bit of color correction with this color grading wheel. And I already knew ahead of time that I just wanted to be more blues and maybe just a slight tint of like a cyan or a green, kind of like that in the midtones. And we can add a little bit of it too. But this is pretty much it. We're going to add a little bit of a field blur just to this background here, so I can have a bit more separation with our background and with our main character. So that's what we're adding here. And we can add a little bit of light overall. But ladies and gentlemen, this is it. This is our final image here and what we've created. I hope you've enjoyed the process. If you like this kind of video and maybe doing more of breaking down videos, just let me know in the comment section below. I hope everybody had a great and happy holidays. Please be safe, everybody. Take care, and hope to have you back for our next video here at Blended Graphics. I'll see you soon.